He was trapped in a burning tank. His crew was dead. The hatch was sealed shut. And then, German soldiers climbed on top. Not to finish him off, but to pull him out. What happened next will shock you. Let's go back to the beginning. March 24th, 1945. 0600 hours, just outside Kolbach, a German village that had already forgotten what a roof looked like. The woods behind it still smoldered from last night's shelling, and the frost-covered ground crunched beneath tank treads like crushed bone. Private Johnny McKay was 19 years old, just old enough to vote, not old enough to drink, and already carrying the weight of 3 dead tank crews in his silence. He was the lead gunner of Lady Irene, an aging Sherman M4 painted with half-washed stars and a patchy weld job that groaned every time she climbed a hill. Her armor was scarred from Metz, her optics misaligned since Bastogne, but she still rumbled forward like a stubborn old mule, and they loved her for it. Their orders were pinned to the inside of Sergeant Griggs's map case. Advance and secure Ridge 53. What it didn't say was that Ridge 53 was a coffin propped up by trees and aimed directly at God. Inside the turret with Johnny sat Sergeant Milo Griggs, lean, scar-faced, always chewing a splinter of wood like it could keep his nerves steady. Below them was Foster, the driver, who talked slow and wrote home often, mostly about his son, born while they were still pushing through Belgium. In the assistant driver's seat rode Rodriguez, silent, sharp-eyed, a rosary always clutched in his fist during morning startup. Harmon, their usual gunner, was coughing up something red back in the second tank. TB, maybe. No one asked. No one wanted the answer. Johnny adjusted the cracked periscope. Fog drifted like smoke across the trees, thick enough to hide a platoon. The air stank of diesel and wet earth. He lit a Lucky Strike with shaking fingers, tucked it behind his ear, and said nothing. At 0630, the first explosion cracked the morning. It wasn't theirs. Booker's Sherman, 20 meters ahead, simply vanished. 1 second it was there, grinding forward. The next, it was a blossom of flame and steel, turret blown clean off, wheels spinning in the mud. "Jesus Christ!" Johnny started. "Incoming! Artillery! High explosive! They've got us zeroed!" Griggs bellowed, thumbing the radio. It spat static. Then Lady Irene took her hit. The world kicked sideways. A direct strike to the lower hull. Not enough to split them, but enough to shove hell through the floor. Fire ripped through the belly. Sparks showered the ammo rack. Rodriguez screamed, then stopped. Foster's voice turned into a bubbling wail. Smoke flooded the compartment. The radio went dark. The hatch above clanged. Stuck. Jammed by the blast. No way out. No help coming. Johnny couldn't feel his legs. Heat licked up his spine. His face burned. The iron walls closed in. But through the blur and soot and cracked glass of the sight, he saw them. Barely. A camouflaged German bunker, gun barrels glinting, 88s wheeling to finish what they started. "I still got the gun," he choked, blood in his throat. Griggs, coughing, bleeding from the ears, turned toward him and nodded. "Then fire, McKay." Johnny's hands found the crank. The turret groaned in protest. Blood from his chin fell on the steel. He was 19, hit by artillery. Fire called, and he never left the hatch. By 0800 hours, the air inside Lady Irene was no longer air. It was poison, metallic, thick, heavy like wet wool. Smoke clung to every surface. Each breath scraped down their throats like swallowing razors. The fire in the belly had cooled, or perhaps just run out of oxygen. But the smell of scorched paint, oil, and flesh lingered like a shadow that wouldn't leave. Foster had gone quiet. His head lolled against the control yoke, jaw slack, eyes open but unfocused. Rodriguez's foot still jerked involuntarily. It tapped against the floor in slow rhythm, like he was trying to keep time to a song no one could hear anymore. His rosary had melted to his collar. Johnny's face was slick with sweat and blood. He tried to shift his legs but felt only heat and pins. When he inhaled, he tasted iron. His ears rang, high and constant. Griggs was still alive. Barely. He coughed dry, painful spasms, one hand gripping the inner latch of the turret hatch. He gave it a yank, then another. Nothing. "Welded," he muttered. Or cursed. Johnny squinted through the cracked periscope. Outside, the ridge stretched toward a line of stunted trees and broken earth. From that tree line came movement. Gray, hunched shapes darting from cover to crater. Infantry, German. A team with Panzerfausts zigzagged toward the ridge. The other Shermans had pulled back. Baker Company was pinned. Lady Irene was the only thing holding the line, a burning coffin with a cannon. "We can't sit," Johnny rasped. "They'll flank us." Griggs slid down next to him. His uniform was torn and blackened. His voice had turned to gravel. "If you can still fire, we buy them time." It wasn't a command. It wasn't a question. It was a pact. Johnny cranked the turret. No hydraulics left. Just muscle and pain. Each turn of the wheel was a scream in his spine. He lined up on the far left 88, dug into sandbags behind a wrecked wagon. He exhaled. Fired. The Sherman rocked from recoil. The shell struck home. The enemy cannon bloomed in flame. Shouts echoed beyond the smoke. Johnny didn't stop. He pulled the lever, turned again. Griggs, wordless, jammed another shell into the breach. Second shot. A half-track exploded. Limbs, wheels, fire. Johnny screamed as the recoil split his thigh open. Warmth flooded his pant leg. He couldn't feel his foot anymore. "They're still coming," he whispered. "Whole goddamn company." Griggs didn't answer. His hands were slick, his breathing ragged. But he still moved, still loaded. Johnny wiped his eyes. His hand came away red. The periscope blurred. The Germans had slowed, just for a moment, uncertain whether the crippled Sherman was still a threat. Then came the sound neither man wanted to hear, the high, hissing shriek of an incoming shell. They heard it just a moment too late. "Brace!" It slammed into the turret ring. The world detonated sideways. Johnny didn't scream this time. He didn't move. He just fell into black. He came to with the sound of metal screaming, a kind of deep groan like a steel animal dying slowly. Johnny couldn't move. His ribs were broken. He knew that. The air was oil and carbon and char. The turret was tilted off axis. The gun was split. But outside, shapes still moved. He saw boots, German, passing the burning wreck, laughing. Griggs didn't speak, didn't breathe. He sat against the side wall, his face half melted, his arm still resting near the shell rack, as if asleep. Johnny blinked. Then, miraculously, he saw something. 2 German medics moving toward the wreck from the tree line. One held a white rag. Surrender? Johnny's hand trembled near the pistol, but he didn't reach for it. He couldn't. One of them climbed the hull. "He's alive," the German said in broken English. "How?" said the other. Johnny blinked. "You gonna shoot me?" Silence. Then, "No, but you need to get out." "Can't. Hatches fused." The German stared at him, then dropped. Seconds later, with grunts and curses, they forced the hatch open with a pry bar. Smoke fled upward like a ghost escaping. They pulled him out gently. Johnny screamed once, quietly. Then he passed out in enemy arms. He woke up in a field hospital 2 weeks later. American. France, April. A nurse told him he'd been found by local resistance and passed along the lines. She didn't mention the Germans. Johnny didn't ask. He spent 3 months staring at white ceilings. 3 ribs shattered. 1 lung collapsed. Left leg saved, barely. Griggs was gone. So were Foster and Rodriguez. He never went back to the front. In 1957, a man in a gray coat showed up in Montana. He had a cane, a faded military badge, and a scar across his temple. German accent. He handed Johnny a photograph, Lady Irene, burning, and said, "I was one of them, the ones who opened the hatch." "Why?" Johnny asked. The man shrugged. "Because you stayed." They shook hands, never spoke again. Johnny never gave speeches, never marched in parades, but once a year he visited a field outside Kolbach. There's a stone there now, not a grave, just a name. Sergeant Milo Griggs. He fired back, and below it, carved by someone who must have known. He was only 19, hit by artillery, fire called, but he never left the hatch.